Hello, welcome to UTS Startups Confessions, where I talk to entrepreneurs I respect a lot, and I get to sit here and bathe in the glory of their journey and the amazing things that they're putting themselves through so that other people at home who have similar kind of backgrounds or kind of thoughts in their head can feel more comfortable about pursuing it themselves. So I'm going to stop talking as I always do, because you have an amazing story, Loki, a truly amazing story, and I want people out there that are similar to your background to be thinking about doing what you're doing now. That world is a nice place to me if more people are doing that. So if you can, in 10 seconds, can you describe Performl?
Sure, thanks Murray. Performl is a B2B SaaS business, and what we're doing is taking the world's information about people's unmet social support needs and structuring that into a technology platform so that our customers can find really quick answers to important questions that they have on how to better support people. And so, for example, in the disability area in Australia, we've got all of the data about people's unmet disability support needs, and we've spent hours and hours and days and weeks and months structuring that in a way so that our disability support not-for-profit customers, local government, state and federal agencies and others can find really specific and quick information and intelligence about where people have unmet need and what they should do about it. So in areas like autism or in areas like different levels of functioning or disability accommodation, we can really pinpoint at specific small place areas, local government areas, postcodes, service district areas, where the gaps are and what could be done about it.
Okay, I'm going to ask for more detail on that, because with 500 people watching this stream, we might need to get a few of them up to speed on that a little more.
Yep.
So could I have an example of the kind of company that you're working with and the kind of outcomes that they can get?
Absolutely. So some example customers are Karitani, we've got Scope, we've got Northcott, and these not-for-profits have a critical business need to know where their customers are. So in those examples, their customers include vulnerable children and families, people with disability, and there's actually a lot of public information that's out there, principally through governments, but other sources too, in answer to that question. But for various reasons, it's structured incredibly poorly, and so these customers see a great value in a service for someone to make sense of all of that information so that they can use it to better understand where the areas they're working in, where they're being successful, and also unmet need. And typically that problem now is solved through consultants, through researchers who produce reports, often very long reports. And we're trying to flip that on its head and say, we can actually platform all of the information through technology in a terminal that these customers can self-service themselves without a Loki, without a consultant, without anyone else but themselves, to find the answers to the questions they've got in those moments that they have them.
Okay, so this again will make a lot more sense when I ask you, who were you before starting Performl?
So before starting Performl, I've spent the last 14 years in the social services sector. My last job was as a chief of staff to 3 state government social services ministers, which I really enjoyed, and got to see how the state's $7.8 billion in recurrent annual expenditure is spent on people with social support needs, so homelessness, domestic violence, mental health, etc. And before that, I spent 4 years at KPMG in their global management consulting practice that specialises just in the social sector. So I did a year in New Zealand, helping set up the Child Protection Agency over there, and then 3 years in other broad consulting work with not-for-profits and government, helping them make sense of all of this information, intelligence about what people's needs are and how they should essentially spend taxpayer dollars to better support those people.
Okay, so how do they normally try to understand the problem in those situations?
Well, there's teams and teams of people in government and in a lot of these not-for-profits whose job is to understand the data, the information, make sense of what is out there. Often consultants, external consultants are engaged. I did a lot of that work at KPMG in areas like aged care, disability. They're $22 and $24 billion annual markets, so there's no shortage of money in the system. But there's a critical need to know where the people are who have those support needs and what should be done about it. So it's quite a time-intensive task to put all of that together and make sense of it. It's labour-intensive task at the moment, and it's done in a project-by-project way. So when I was in consulting, a customer would come in and they'd say, we want to know everything about X, Y, and Z in the aged care market, and we would go away and we would pull together everything we could in answer to that question, and we'd leave them with a report, and then we'd go on and do it again for another customer. And so what we're trying to do is develop an information architecture or a spine which all of this information can be connected to so that customers can query it themselves without the need for a human analyst. So unlike consultants where they invest their time and their money and their effort in the project-by-project work, we're investing our time in building an information asset that can be deployed in multiple contexts for multiple customers.
Okay. You're 6 months into this.
That's right.
Okay. How's it going 6 months in?
6 months in has been it's been a interesting 6 months because I had to do everything myself to begin with. So when I started, there were obvious sort of technical difficulties in figuring out how with software and technology this could be done, acquiring our first customers, getting support from those sort of first believers. So it's been a very I've had to do things that I've never done before in any of my other professional roles, which has been really enjoyable. Often a lot of stress, but also a lot of learning. And I've been very lucky to receive some support from the Snow Foundation. So they ran a program for the first time actually this year called the Snow Social Entrepreneurs, where the Snow philanthropic team put $1 million for 8 to 10 entrepreneurs to get grant money to kickstart startup ideas for things that they believed in, and I was lucky enough to receive one of those grants. So it's been a really busy 6 months.
But even that, firstly, that's incredible by itself, 6 months in. But how many customers do you have now?
We've got 8 customers.
So 8 of these kind of not-for-profit
That's right.
enterprises that are now better understanding their customers using what you've developed.
Well, and we're very grateful for them because initially when I pitched to each of those 8 customers, it literally was a slide deck. I went in, met with their teams, and tried to test with them the thesis that if we could use technology to solve this, that it's something they would see great value in. And because the painful nature of the problem that these customers face is so great, it wasn't difficult to convince them of that. And I was lucky enough to get some of those early believers in these fee-paying customers to say, okay, we'll back you for 12 months on a month-by-month subscription. And I guess my promise to them was, worst case scenario, I'll leave you with a report as good or bad as insert consulting firm for 1/10 of the price. And best case scenario is at month 13, you'll choose to continue your subscription into the platform because you see enough value in it to do so.
Okay, that is beautiful as an approach. I think it's a really underrated and unrecognized way of starting a B2B company is consulting back to companies you understand, giving them enough value that they know they're happy paying that based on what an hourly fee would be, but productizing that and turn it into something that can scale as well.
Yeah, that's right. And for me, I knew, I had enough knowledge, having worked in the industry so long, to go and have a first best guess at this without talking to customers. But I also knew the best way for me to shortcut failure would be to have real fee-paying customers with actual real questions that were the things that they actually wanted to know, not my idea of what they wanted to know. And that if I put in place a process where what I was building was in aid of answering those real questions, it would be a much quicker path to success than me just thinking about it on my own.
Okay, so getting customers on board, doing the things that you're used to doing to make sure that they get the value. What else have you been doing in the last 6 months to kind of build this company out?
So I've had to teach myself some basic technology skills. I don't have a technology background, so I've done free code camp. I've taught myself basic data engineering. I've learned how to code in Python in a very rudimentary level, and it was a very sort of difficult thing to embark on for someone who's only done social policy, research and analysis, the more left brain way of thinking potentially. And I did find the first 6 weeks of that quite difficult, but I persevered and have got a very, very basic level now of technical understanding in HTML, CSS to do enough basic work myself, but more importantly, understand, I guess, the scope of technologies that exist to solve this type of problem. I'm never going to be able to master any particular technology, I don't think, but being able to ask the right questions of people who do know how to use technology is the most important thing that I can do. And I don't think I'd be able to do that very well if I didn't have at least a basic understanding of what's out there and how it works.
Okay. So you mentioned asking questions. Are you asking a lot of people about this company? Are you networking with people? How are you kind of building your understanding of this and what other people think of it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I am out through university, graduate pathways, including through UTS. I've been lucky enough to be part of the UTS Startup support, and you guys have connected me already with a bunch of resources, both within the university and in the market, which have been very useful. Obviously starting to have early discussions with potential fundraisers as well. There's some really strong Sydney-based communities in the technology industry. There's early work, which I've been connected with, and I think was one of their first customers, and they've got this great, really vibrant community of technologists, young technologists who want to do interesting social impact, social sector work. There's the Tech Council for Australia. There's so many groups and networks out there at the moment, and it is a bit overwhelming to work through, all of the touch points that you have to hit to get connected with this industry. But I've certainly prioritised that and found it very useful, because at each of those moments you always find the next person that you should speak to, or realise the next question that you should ask, and it's a much quicker way to learn than just sitting at your desk thinking about it on your own.
How do you know who to listen to?
That is a really difficult question to answer. I've got so much feedback and advice from some really experienced and smart people that contradicts other advice that I've had. And so in the end, I think you have to listen to it, but you also have to evaluate it. You have to lay it all out, and at the end of the day, you have to make a call. I think particularly with technology companies, but as such an early stage idea and concept, the risks are so high. Execution means everything. If customers don't see value, nothing really matters. So I think if you stay focused on the basics, the advice can help inform what you do. But at the end of the day, if you've got that idea and you've tested it and you've validated it and you think that's where the value lies and that's what's going to make the difference, you just have to stay really focused on delivery of that.
Okay. There's three questions I really want to ask. I said there was going to be two earlier, but I thought of a third one. Because I know there's going to be people watching this that are maybe KPMG consultants or consultants somewhere else.
Yeah.
With your background and experience, you could be very comfortable in a consulting gig for a long time. Mm-hmm. How do you take yourself out of that situation and do something like this where you're making nothing, you're working very hard, you're doing something people have not done before? How do you take that plunge as a person?
It is really hard, but I took the plunge because I knew that the opportunities that exist for me to take elsewhere weren't as exciting to me at the time as the idea of just giving this a go. And I also was very, I'm starting a new family, or starting a family, and I've got a life as well. So I knew this would be a huge investment of my time, and the lost opportunity that might result in from not being able to do other things. So I've been quite clear that I don't want to start a startup and be still doing this 8 years from now and it not be something that's successful. That I've got quite maybe unusually cruel to myself in the sense of quite tight milestones and things that I want to achieve over the next 6, 12, 18 months to validate that this is really worth it pouring all of my heart and soul and time into. And I think you have to be really honest about some of those things so that you don't get caught in the trap of being so focused on what you're doing that you don't see maybe what you're missing out on. So I think honesty is important, but also if you've got that itch and you feel as frustrated about solving the problem as I did, you just got to give it a go, because you can always go back to those other things that exist. I think there was at some level a thought in my mind that if I do this and it's not successful, I'm never going to get a job in a normal place to work or whatever. It's just not true. And I think I've learnt so much just on how to set up a business, how to run accounts, how to do a business plan, how to get out there and market, how to talk to fundraisers. So All of those things are not opportunities you'd typically get in a regular consulting or other professional services role. So what you miss out on in developing your career, I think you make up in spades through the things that you have to learn to work in a startup or start a startup. But I think having time limits and really clear, honest milestones of success for yourself are important. Otherwise, you'll never know whether it was worth it.
What about the people in government that are having wonderful impact in the different parts of government they're in? How should they think about taking the plunge into something like this?
Well, I think,
Is it similar?
I mean, government is in this incredibly privileged position where they see so many of the opportunities and the problems. So I think people in government have got incredible insight into how things should change. The nature of government often means that those people are handcuffed to some extent about what they can do, or at least what they can say about that. I think the same applies really, I think, for anyone who's in a secure, 9-to-5 job, that the risk profile is about the same. I don't think it matters particularly if you're in government, but certainly through getting connected, I guess, with the community and networks of people out there who are in the technology startup scene. I wouldn't say that there's a huge amount of ex-government people out there. I think it's an area that a lot of my interests are in the social sector, and that's what Performl's trying to solve for. So for me, selfishly, it would be better if there were more ex-government people out there because they'd understand and maybe be as passionate as me about the problem that we're solving. But I think as well, government attracts typically, you have to be relatively risk averse to succeed in government. You have to be quite managed, and you have to be quite judicious, and you have to be quite careful. And so perhaps some of those qualities are almost the antithesis of what you need to just jump off the cliff and start up a business.
Well, it's on a spectrum. I think if you have this privileged access to information and are able to see this problem that isn't obvious to everyone else, and you're able to build up these skills that allow you to solve it better than anyone else can, and you have relationships with all the customers that might be potential customers. That's right. You can make that jump a lot more confidently than anyone else can.
And I should say, there's, like, my time in government I really enjoyed, and there's an incredible, there's probably some term for them, but people who are entrepreneurial within government are everywhere, and without people like that, it would be very hard for internal change to occur. So there's certainly lots of public officials and people in senior and not so senior roles in government who are every day coming up with innovative ways to solve old problems. And I think the fostering that can be really challenging and difficult sometimes, but there's some, in New South Wales and federal government, some great leaders and great programs and opportunities to do that. And then the tech and startup non-government players can support that as well.
Okay. What does Performl look like over the next couple of years?
So the reality is it's just going to be a hell of a lot of work, because there's so much volume in what we're trying to do, and the scope of what we're trying to do is so vast. So it's going to look like a lot of data engineering and a lot of data science work to make sense of this really huge amount of information about people's needs and people's unmet needs. We have to build out a technology stack that's capable of handling that volume and that complexity, and also serving it to our customers in a meaningful way. But we also have to obviously get customers and continue to market and continue to develop our products as we're building them with that growing set of foundation customers. And ultimately, we're going to have to fundraise at some stage, because the scope of what we're trying to achieve is so capital intensive and so capital demanding to do it beyond 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 segments, but across all segments in one country and across all segments in multiple countries, is a tremendously difficult and time intensive process. So it's going to be a lot of work, but we're excited that we've had such early validation, I guess, of the core problem that we've set out to try and solve. And it's one of those things where you kind of just have to keep chipping away at it, because we've got the proof point that there's enormous value in this for people that have got this problem that they're trying to have our platform and use consultants currently to solve for, and we're just going to keep cracking along at it.
Okay, because I was going to ask, would you accept investors if someone was watching this and thought it was fantastic, but it sounds like you would.
Yeah, we're looking, I think for us, we've got to get to a directional pathway. If we're going to go down the VC route early, that's something that we're exploring actively now, and have got a time frame of, say, end of June to decide what the opportunities are, whether we can find the right partner, whether a commercial and reasonable kind of outcome can be achieved. And if not, get on and bootstrap it, keep doing all of the gritty work for the next 12 to 18 months and get to that next inflection point where the capital raising conversation theoretically should be much easier. It's a very, very, very early stage business idea. And so at the end of the day, when you're trying to validate that to people who might invest in it and ask you for the proof points, it's a concept, it's an idea and a concept that some customers have validated, a lot of experience in the sector and some thoughts about how it can be solved with technology in a way that can scale. But there's so much risk and uncertainty associated with it as well. So it's a very, it's a hard thing to quantify, but we're going to keep having those discussions. And if we can get an early stage investor, that's fantastic. And if we can't, then we're just going to keep going and build it.
Okay, well, that's the thing. There is a spectrum of risk, and having customers signing up before you have a product and paying you money, decent money, is a nice kind of end of the risk spectrum for me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure for investors watching.
It's made having those conversations much easier. Yep.
Yeah. Last two, how has the last 6 months changed you as a person?
I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, and not to say I haven't enjoyed other things I'm doing, but I do feel very passionately, and I'm very passionate about solving this problem. So I'm having a lot of fun, and I guess to some extent I'm on my own terms. I've got, with all of the kind of downside and the risk and some stress and difficulty and the financial penalty of not paying myself a salary, comes a lot of freedom and the creativity to do what you're really passionate about and just focus on it. And that's an incredibly rewarding thing. So I'm very pleased that I did it. And at least for now, very much enjoying it and getting the rewards from that freedom and creativity.
Okay. Learning things you wouldn't otherwise learn?
Oh, heaps of things, like just even basic stuff like how to register a domain name for a website, or how to set up a company, or how to think through some of the tax implications of doing that, and what a shareholders agreement are, and how venture capitalists value a company that's at a seed stage, and all of these things that are quite sort of niche, maybe quite specific skills, but they're broad commercial and business skills, which I think it's one thing to approach it theoretically and in an abstract way, but when it's your thing that you're doing, it means a lot more to you. So they're quite interesting lessons to learn that hopefully can take through in other ventures and other areas of life.
And I will say they sound easier to learn than all the stuff that you already know about the market and the problem that you're solving. But it's nice to have that exposure to things you wouldn't otherwise have a reason to learn.
Yeah, that's right.
And for all the current government people or consultants or other people that are down the camera watching this, any advice for them that maybe you wish someone had given you 6 months ago?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're thinking about a startup or you're super passionate about an idea and a problem that you want to solve for, just give it a go. I think, as I said before, there were definitely some people in my friendship network who were saying, oh, is the time really right for you to give this a go? And what happens if it doesn't work? And sort of raising a reasonable question of doubt. I think all of those things are fairly trivial in the context of your professional life. And if you're passionate about something, then you should definitely try it. And all of those other opportunities will still be there. They'll be there waiting for you. You'll be able to pursue them. It's not going to be the end of your career. And that fear factor or that instinctive sort of, oh, is this the right move? It's a reasonable thing to have, but you should also just get over it and give it a go.
Okay, beautiful. We'll land there. There will be jobs in government in future. There will be consulting gigs in future.
Correct.
But who knows how often an opportunity like this comes along.
That's right.
This is going to be incredible. I love this as something that will be successful, but will also have a wonderful impact on a lot of people, millions of people getting better service, tax money being spent better. It sounds fantastic.
Thanks, Murray.
We'll talk later about investment. Thank you very much for watching. I will say every Friday at 3:30 we do these sessions. We're going to stop the recording now and do a private Q&A where we can ask some more juicy questions about things that we can't put onto the stream. Please, if you're watching this, come and join us 3:30 every Friday at UTS Startups Central. Everyone, please join me in thanking Loki.